My name is Malik Owens, and for most of my adult life, I was the man who handled it. Not because I was asked, though sometimes I was, but because it became expected, like the sunrise or the water bill. I was the dependable one, the one who showed up with a check, a solution, a ride, or a clean credit score. When my younger brother Andre couldn't keep up with the ballooning mortgage on that oversized house he bought to impress women he never kept, I covered it. Quietly, month after month. When our mother collapsed from exhaustion and needed to be in and out of clinics for tests and therapy, I paid. Never once blinked. Not when I had to skip vacations. Not when I had to dip into my savings. Not even when my own car sat in the repair shop for 2 months because I was too stretched to fix it. And yes, even after Samira left me, signed those papers with a little flourish, and went out for margaritas that same night, I still bailed her out. Twice. First when her car got impounded because she forgot to renew the insurance, and again when her landlord threatened to evict her for missing 2 months of rent. Somehow, I was still a good man. A compliment that always came with a hidden price tag. No one ever said thank you. Not really. Not in a way that counted. My father would nod once, like I'd done what a son should. My mother would say, "God bless you," but mostly when she needed another payment handled. Andre would shrug and toss me an "appreciate you, bro," on his way to another party. They never noticed the tired in my eyes, the way my jaw clenched when the phone rang. They thought Malik was unshakable, that he existed to hold the weight of everyone else's chaos without making a sound. And for the longest time, I believed that too. I'd tell myself that being responsible meant being invisible, that my worth was measured by how little noise I made when I picked up the pieces for everybody else. I buried resentment under logic. Told myself they didn't mean to use me, that they were just overwhelmed, that I was strong enough to help. And I was. But strength isn't the same as peace. And quiet isn't the same as content. That night, the night it all unraveled, didn't begin like a storm. It started like any other evening. I was standing in the kitchen of my one-bedroom apartment reheating leftover jollof rice, wearing the same gray t-shirt I wore every Thursday after work. My phone pinged. It was a group message from Nadia, our cousin who'd always been somewhere between family and socialite. This Saturday, don't miss it. Andre's 35th. Big bash at the estate. Come early. Dress nice. It's family. I remember just staring at it. There was no direct mention of me. No, "Hey, Malik, hope you can make it." Just an assumption. Just a notice. I scrolled through the replies, fire emojis, "can't wait," and gifs of champagne popping. Samira had replied too. So excited to see everyone woman dancing medium dark skin own lipstick nail polish medium dark skin own, and there it was. Another gathering where I'd be the background music to their good time. The quiet one. The wallet with a body. The man who always showed up alone and left with a headache. I could have ignored it. Could have made an excuse. But something in me twitched, a part of me that was tired of being invisible in plain sight. So I showed up. I wore my best slacks, the navy ones that still looked pressed even after a full day in the office. Crisp white shirt. No tie. Just clean and quiet, the way I always came. I brought a wrapped gift, nothing flashy, just thoughtful. A limited edition chess set Andre once admired when we were younger. I figured maybe, just maybe, this would be different. Maybe they'd remember I was a brother, not a butler. But I knew better. I knew before I even rang the gay bell and heard the beat of music thumping from the backyard. Laughter floated through the air, the sound of unbothered joy. A kind of carefree I couldn't afford. Nadia greeted me with her kisses and champagne breath. "Malik, look at you. Still dressing like a banker. Come, come." She didn't ask how I was. Didn't ask if I was seeing someone. Just grabbed my arm and pulled me into the noise. Inside, everything smelled like money and memory. White lights strung from trees, custom cocktails named after Andre, even a DJ spinning our old college playlist. And there, like a trophy, was Samira, dressed like she was auditioning for a reality show, hair slicked back, a red dress cut just low enough to remind me she never dressed like that when we were married. She waved. I nodded, kept walking. I made it about 10 steps in before someone handed me a drink and asked, "So, Malik, you still paying all our bills?" It was a joke. Kind of, but not really. They laughed. I smiled, small and polite, and took the drink. The rest of the night blurred into the usual pattern. Me orbiting their conversations, dropping in just long enough to be noticed, never long enough to matter. I found a spot near the edge of the pool and just watched them. Andre holding court like a celebrity. Samira laughing too loud. Mom praising Andre's kids like I hadn't once helped raise them while he chased business ideas that never panned out. They didn't know I was tired. They didn't know my account had dipped below a balance I hadn't seen in 5 years. They didn't know that I had eaten instant noodles for 3 days so Mom could get her meds last month. They didn't ask, and I didn't tell, because I knew what they saw when they looked at me. Malik, the man who pays the tab, who fixes problems, who never complains, who always shows up. I took a long sip of the cocktail. It was too sweet, syrupy, masking the bitterness underneath. Like them, like all of this. I stood there and realized something. I wasn't angry because they forgot to thank me. I was angry because they never even thought to. That was the moment everything began to shift. Not loud, not with rage, just a quiet decision, one I would carry into the next chapter of my life like a match ready to strike. Andre was always the star. Even when we were kids, he could say the dumbest joke at the dinner table and everyone would laugh like he was doing a Netflix special. I'd come home with straight A's, and Dad would barely nod. Andre? He passed woodshop and got a round of applause. So when I got the invitation to his 35th birthday celebration at Nadia's estate, I knew what it was going to be, another evening of applause for the prodigal son. But I went. Not because I wanted to celebrate him, but because I needed to see something for myself. I needed to know if I was really as invisible as I felt, or if I'd just let myself become a ghost in their lives. Nadia's estate was nothing short of theatrical. She'd always loved showing off, and that night was no exception. String lights wrapped every tree trunk. A white carpet, not red, white, ran from the front gate to the backyard. A live band played soft jazz while servers in black vests offered trays of drinks and canapes like we were attending a political fundraiser. There were gold balloons shaped like 3 and 5 floating above a champagne tower, and a huge sign lit up in cursive, Andre's legacy. Legacy. As if turning 35 made him a statesman. I parked 2 blocks away because her driveway was already full of imported cars and rental SUVs. My old sedan wheezed its protest, but it got me there. That's all it ever did. That's all I ever did, just get them there. I stepped onto the carpet, clutching a neatly wrapped gift under my arm. A nice leather-bound planner with Andre's initials monogrammed in gold. It wasn't flashy, but it was practical, thoughtful, something I'd put effort into. That still meant something to me. Inside the house, it felt like time travel. Faces I hadn't seen in years, some I never wanted to see again. Friends from college. Distant cousins. Church folks who used to call me the quiet one. They all seemed to age in opposite directions, more confident, more comfortable, more bold. Or maybe I had just grown quieter over time, blending into the corners of my own story. I spotted Samira almost immediately. She was wearing a form-fitting navy blue jumpsuit and a smile that looked rehearsed. Her hair was done up in loose waves, her lipstick a deliberate shade of bold. She looked alive, like she'd been thriving post-divorce. I didn't feel hate when I saw her, just distance, like someone I used to know in a dream. She didn't see me at first, too busy laughing with Andre and touching his arm in that performative way she always did, like proximity meant possession. She looked too happy for someone who once sobbed during our final argument, begging for another chance, then ghosted me for 6 months. Andre wore a light gray suit with a black shirt underneath, no tie, sleeves rolled. Like a CEO of nothing. He was holding a whiskey glass and commanding a circle of people I barely recognized. They laughed at everything he said, like laughter was currency and he printed the bills. I lingered near the back, watching, listening, nodding when someone passed by and said, "Oh, Malik. Well, man, it's been forever." They didn't really want to talk. They just wanted to check a box, say they acknowledged me, then move on. And that was fine. I wasn't here to catch up. I wasn't even here to celebrate. I just wanted to observe, to collect the proof I needed. A server walked by, and I took a glass of ginger ale. I hadn't had a drink since the night after the divorce was finalized. Not because I couldn't, but because I didn't want anything else clouding my clarity. That ginger ale was crisp, cold, and real. Something solid in a night full of pretense. Halfway through the evening, Nadia clinked a fork against her wine glass and announced it was time for speeches. Let's give our love and attention to the birthday boy Andre Owens. A round of cheers followed. I clapped politely, watching as Andre stepped up to the patio stage like he was delivering a TED Talk. He launched into his usual banter, how grateful he was, how blessed he felt, how family was everything. I counted how many times he used the word grind in 5 minutes. 7. He was always about the hustle. The image. But as he talked, I noticed something. His eyes kept darting toward me, like he was waiting, planning something. And I knew, right then, that I hadn't just come to a party. I'd walked into his setup. Maybe it wasn't malicious. Maybe it was just Andre being Andre. But I could feel it in the air, like someone had turned the temperature down a notch. Samira was now sitting right next to him. My mother had shifted closer to the front. Even my father, who barely left the house these days, had shown up and taken a seat like this was some coronation. And me? I was the exhibit. The museum piece of what not to become. As the laughter from Andre's story about his college days died down, he paused and looked directly at me. And I gotta say, he began, holding his mic like it was a torch. It's always a blessing to have my big brother Malik here. Always the quiet one. Always the steady one. People turned toward me. I gave a small nod. Didn't smile. But man, he added, tilting his head, I gotta ask, what's it like being 38, no wife, no kids, still alone? Laughter. Too much laughter. Not the polite kind. The loud, roaring, punchline kind. Like he just said something groundbreaking. I felt something twist in my stomach. Samira threw her head back and cackled like someone had paid her. My Uncle Jerome laughed so hard he slapped the table. And me? I stood there, glass in hand, staring at my own reflection in the glass door behind him. That's when I realized something important. They didn't see me. Not really. Not the sacrifices. Not the history. Not the fact that their favorite son, their golden child, had built his little kingdom on a foundation I paid for. They didn't know the bills I'd covered, the emergencies I'd handled, the vacations I canceled so they wouldn't drown. I wasn't family. I was financing. The laughter started to fade, but the shame didn't. It crawled up my spine and settled behind my eyes. But I didn't blink. I didn't move. Not yet. Because something in me had snapped, clean and final. I looked at Andre as he basked in his little moment, and I knew he had no idea what was coming. I was done being the silent one. Done being the ghost at the party I paid for. The bass from the speakers thumped through the walls, vibrating under my shoes like a heartbeat I couldn't match. The air was thick with perfume, barbecue smoke, and whatever cologne Andre had doused himself in. It was loud, of course it was loud. Nadia didn't know how to throw a quiet party, and Andre didn't know how to walk into a room without turning every head. But I wasn't there for the noise. I was there to witness the moment the mask cracked. Mine, theirs, all of it. Even if I hadn't fully admitted that to myself yet. I found a corner, because that's where people like me always end up. I leaned against a wall near the drink station and sipped ginger ale while watching the party swirl around me like I was observing a world I didn't quite belong to. And maybe I didn't. Maybe I had stopped belonging a long time ago, but just hadn't noticed. Or worse, had noticed and kept showing up anyway. My mom sat across the room under a white canopy, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf the color of cranberry. She looked proud, smiling as she told stories about Andre's tenacity and vision. She was bragging about the man who hadn't once picked up a hospital bill when she needed physical therapy. She didn't mention who paid that tab. That was fine. She didn't need to. I already knew how the story went. Andre was the dreamer, the risk-taker, the one who brought excitement. I was the support beam, the one they only noticed when things started to fall apart. Samira, looking like she just walked off a magazine shoot, had now made herself very comfortable beside Andre. She wasn't even pretending to keep distance. Her laugh pierced the air every time he opened his mouth, as if she were auditioning to be his next publicist. She leaned in close, brushing his shoulder with hers, acting like they shared some secret language. I looked away. Not out of jealousy, I was past that. But there's a specific ache that comes with watching someone perform happiness in the exact space where they used to cry beside you. She didn't even glance my way. Not once. Malik, hey man, didn't even see you come in. It was Greg, one of our old college friends. Or maybe just Andre's friend. The lines had always been blurry. He gave me a quick bro hug, the kind that says, I sort of remember you. I forced a smile. Yeah, I slipped in quietly. Man, you haven't changed a bit, he said, looking me up and down like I was a car he thought had been scrapped. Still rocking the low-key vibe, huh? Respect. Translation, still boring. Still predictable. Still not Andre. More people passed by, offered smiles, pats on the back, the occasional, so what are you up to these days? But they didn't really wait for the answer. Their eyes drifted before my sentence ended. The ones who asked where my +1 was didn't realize they were digging into wounds that hadn't fully healed. I didn't want to explain. Didn't want to say, she's thriving without me. thanks, or I'm too busy funding my family's lifestyle to date anyone. So I just nodded and sipped my ginger ale, the fizz biting the back of my throat like it was trying to burn the silence away. Then it happened. The moment I'd been waiting for without even knowing it. I was halfway through a dry conversation with an uncle I hadn't seen since 2018. He was talking about cryptocurrency or prostate health, maybe both, when someone tapped the mic. A piercing squeal rang out, and the music dropped. Andre stood under the patio lights with a whiskey glass in one hand and his other hand raised like a preacher about to bless the crowd. The room, or what passed for one under the night sky and chandeliers, grew quiet in waves. People turned their chairs. Phones came out. Samira's grin widened, and I could already see the setup forming in her eyes. She knew what was coming. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe she just hoped it would sting. Andre launched into his speech. It started off tame. 35, man. Who would have thought? He began, and a few chuckles answered back. Feels like yesterday I was stealing Malik's bike and getting away with it. The crowd laughed. I smiled, faintly. That part was true. He talked about growth, about family, about redemption arcs, and leveling up. His vocabulary always borrowed from TV dramas and self-help books. Then, with all eyes on him, he took a sip, grinned, and looked right at me. And of course, it's a blessing to have my big brother here. Always been the quiet one. The steady one. I froze. Not because of the words, but because of the pause that came after. The silence he stretched long enough for tension to settle. He tilted his head, smile widening. But Malik, man, what's it like being 38? No wife, no kids, still out here solo dolo? Laughter erupted. It didn't hit all at once. It rolled through the crowd like a ripple, small chuckles growing into full-on howls. Samira slapped her thigh. My mom covered her mouth, but I saw the smirk peek through. Even my father, who rarely reacted to anything unless it involved politics or price hikes, cracked a grin. I stood there, ginger ale in hand, the bubbles dying in the glass. I didn't move, didn't blink. I just kept my eyes on Andre. The room around me blurred, like I'd stepped outside of myself. All I could hear was the echo of that question. Still alone, like I was an empty chair in a room full of legacies. That wasn't a joke. That was a dagger wrapped in ribbon. And what stunned me wasn't just the audacity. It was the fact that no one stopped him. No one looked uncomfortable. They all laughed like it was the most natural thing in the world. And that told me everything. I wasn't family anymore. I was a target, a prop in someone else's triumph speech. I was the object they needed to stay broken, because my brokenness justified their glow-up. It hit me. Then, with the force of something I couldn't dodge, these weren't old wounds anymore. These were fresh cuts. New bruises, delivered in familiar voices. I thought I had come to observe, to collect proof of how they saw me. But now I knew the truth. They didn't see me at all. Not as a man. Not as a brother. Not as anything other than a running joke they didn't expect to run out of patience. That was their mistake. There's a certain kind of silence that follows a cruel joke, the kind that starts as laughter, then hesitates, unsure if the target will take the hit or throw it back. That's the silence I sat in after Andre's mic drop moment. The crowd hadn't gone completely quiet, but something in the air had shifted. I could feel their eyes, the sideways glances, the suppressed smirks behind champagne flutes. They waited for me to react, to play along, to be the good sport I'd always been, the Malik who'd chuckle, raise a glass, and act like I hadn't just been reduced to a punchline in a room full of people who owed me more than they even remembered. I didn't move. My ginger ale sat untouched on the table in front of me. The ice had melted. The fizz had gone flat. It felt symbolic somehow. Andre stood on the patio stage, basking in the glow of his audience. He was so used to being adored, so confident in the fact that the room would always rally behind him, that he didn't even realize the line he'd crossed. He held the mic like a trophy, not noticing or not caring that I hadn't laughed, that I hadn't even flinched. Maybe he mistook my calm for approval. Maybe he thought I'd nod, shrug, toss him a thumbs up. I didn't. I just kept looking at him, dead in the eyes. Letty. Samira leaned forward in her seat, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Her laugh had faded now, but her smile lingered, sharp, almost expectant, like she was waiting for me to crack. My mom shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. My father took another sip of whatever he was drinking, eyes focused on the floor. And the rest of the room? They did what they always did when it came to me. Nothing. Just silence, scattered laughter, and an assumption that Malik would take it. Like always. Andre cleared his throat and tried to move on. Anyway, he said, forcing a laugh. Y'all know I'm just messing. Malik knows we love him. He glanced at me with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Right, big bro? That's when something inside me moved. Not anger. Not embarrassment. Something quieter. Older. A tiredness that had roots stretching back years. Through birthdays, funerals, weddings I paid for but wasn't thanked at, bills I covered without being asked, apologies I gave just to keep the peace. Something clicked. And when it did, it felt like a switch being flipped in a room that had been too dark for too long. I stood up. No grand gesture. No dramatic scraping of the chair. I just rose, slow and steady, like I had all the time in the world. The crowd turned to look. Andre's smirk faltered. Samira blinked. My mother leaned forward, lips parted like she was about to say something, but didn't. I reached for my glass. Held it up, casually. What does it feel like? I asked, my voice clear but low, meant only for the ones paying attention. To be 38, no wife, no kids, and still alone? I repeated the question like it was a riddle. It feels peaceful. A few chuckles. Nervous once. Unsure once. But you know what doesn't feel peaceful? I continued, looking directly at Andre. Paying someone's mortgage for 6 years so they can throw parties like this. I let the words land. Saw the confusion cross a few faces. Saw Andre blink like he wasn't sure he heard me right. What doesn't feel peaceful is wiring money every month so the golden child doesn't lose his house. What doesn't feel peaceful is buying school supplies for your kids while being called a failure because I don't have any of my own. The room was dead still now. You want to talk about being alone? I asked. Try sitting in your apartment, watching your ex-wife vacation with a man whose rent you helped her cover after the divorce. Try answering every phone call from family not because they're checking on you, but because they need something. Try listening to your own mother defend someone who just humiliated you in front of 30 people. Someone coughed. A chair creaked. Andre's mouth was open, but no words came out. For once, the mic was useless in his hand. I've been alone a long time, I said, softer now, but not in the way you think. Not lonely, just unseen, used, taken for granted. And tonight, you didn't just confirm it, you broadcast it. I scanned the room slowly. But I want to thank you, actually, because now I see it clearly. All of it. The way you laugh at me, the way you cheer him on, the way you pretend not to notice how many times I've saved you. I set the glass down, untouched again. You all made me feel small for not having a family of my own. But I've been raising yours for years. And I'm done. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I didn't cry. But my words cut deeper than any shout ever could. I could see it in Andre's face. The confusion slowly morphing into guilt, then panic. I could see Samira stiffen, her eyes darting away. My mom looked stunned, blinking like she'd just seen a ghost. Andre opened his mouth again, but I shook my head. No. You had the mic. You had your moment. Let me have mine. I turned to walk away, and that's when I heard it, someone whispering, damn. Just that. One word. But it echoed like thunder. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I'd said what I came to say, even if I hadn't known it when I arrived. This wasn't just a party. It was a reckoning. And I hadn't come to be included. I'd come to end the illusion that I was okay with being everyone's safety net and everyone's joke. Let them sit in that silence. Let them chew on it. I had always carried the weight for this family. But tonight, I dropped it. I didn't plan to say anything. When I stood, my only thought was to walk out of that suffocating backyard filled with fake smiles and flammable egos. But as I rose, glass in hand, I felt the weight of all the years pressing against my chest. Years of silence, of swallowing disrespect because I thought being the bigger person meant being mute. Years of carrying everyone without ever being carried. And suddenly, my legs weren't the only part of me moving. My voice was too. I stood tall, letting the sting of Andre's words settle across the crowd one final time before I began. You asked me what it feels like to be 38, no wife, no kids, and still alone, I said, raising my glass. Let me return the favor. What does it feel like, Andre, knowing the failure you just tried to clown is the reason you still have a roof over your head? The laughter died immediately. It didn't taper. It collapsed, like someone hit the emergency brakes on a moving train. I turned slightly, letting my words carry, letting the moment breathe. What does it feel like? I continued, locking eyes with him. Knowing that the man you called alone is the reason your lights stay on. That every birthday cake for your kids was bought with money that didn't come from your account. That I've covered your mortgage for 6 years without so much as a thank you. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. The truth had a volume all its own. Samira stiffened, her smirk folding in on itself like a cheap tint in the wind. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Nadia, who just minutes ago had been bragging about the party budget, suddenly looked very interested in her wine glass. Andre blinked rapidly, his smirk twitching as if trying to resurrect itself. I wasn't done. I walked toward the center of the table, each step steady, controlled. I felt calm, like a dam had broken inside me, but the flood was moving in slow motion. You know what's funny? I said, glancing at the guests. Every single person here has called me dependable, quiet, steady, but what you really meant was convenient. I was the family ATM, the fixer, the cleanup crew. When someone needed a cosigner, who did you call? When mom needed her medical bills handled, who did you come to? When Samira's car was repossessed after our divorce, mind you, who bailed her out? My voice didn't crack. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Samira looked away, cheeks coloring. Andre opened his mouth, but I lifted my hand to stop him. You had the mic, I said. Now it's my turn. I raised the glass again. To all of you, the ones who laughed, who watched, who said nothing. You don't get to joke about my life while living off the comforted funds. You don't get to paint me as pitiful while sipping from the well I've been filling for over a decade. Dead silence. Even the band had stopped playing. I could hear the wind brushing against the hedges in Nadia's garden, the clink of someone's glass trembling in their hand. Andre looked like he'd swallowed a stone. I took one final sip, not even a full drink. Just a symbol. Then I walked to the table and set the glass down upright. No dramatic smash. No flipping chairs. Just precision. Intent. And then I looked right at Andre one last time. You wanted a punchline, I said, low and steady, but all you did was tell the world who you really are. With that, I turned and walked. The space behind me buzzed, but no one followed immediately. I didn't hear chairs scraping back or footsteps chasing me down. I heard whispers, someone muttering, yo, that was, but no one said my name. I passed Samira on the way out. Her lips parted like she might say something, but she didn't. Maybe she was scared of what else I might say if she did. Or maybe, for the first time, she realized she didn't know me anymore. Good. I walked through the grand double doors of Nadia's estate, past the rows of catered trays and decorative lights, out into the cooling night. The silence wrapped around me like armor. For the first time in years, I wasn't pretending to be okay. I wasn't covering a tab, or smoothing over a slight, or translating pain into politeness. I was just me. Malik Owens. No applause. No audience. Just the man who finally said no. I made it to my car, still the same silver sedan they all liked to tease, the one that didn't scream wealth but had never once let me down. I sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, the aftermath of it all starting to catch up to me. I stared out at the street, breathing in that moment between explosion and peace. It didn't feel like victory. Not yet. It felt like honesty. It felt like reclaiming a version of myself I had been slowly burying under everyone else's expectations. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I didn't pick it up. I didn't care who it was. Apology, anger, defense. I needed none of it. They could all talk among themselves now. Let them dissect the shock. Let them try to piece together what just happened. For once, I wasn't there to clean up. I was done paying everyone's tab, financially, emotionally, spiritually. I was done earning my seat at a table I had already paid for in full. Let them sit in that silence. Let them stew in it. I had plans to make. Plans that didn't involve being anyone's savior. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't linger for reactions. I left that wine glass on the table like a signature at the bottom of a resignation letter and walked out with my spine straighter than it had been in years. That was the thing about truth. It didn't need volume to be seismic. I didn't slam the door behind me or shout over my shoulder. I just moved, step by step, away from the weight I'd been carrying since the day I first got that call from Andre asking, "Bro, you got me this month?" That call had never stopped. It had only changed shape, and I had answered every time until tonight. As I passed through the glowing front hallway of Nadia's estate, I caught glimpses of their faces through the window panes, stunned, whispering, heads huddled together like students after a fire drill. For once, I wasn't the man they could forget. I had become the thing they couldn't ignore. Let them dissect it. Let them spin the story 100 ways by morning. I'd already made peace with my version, the man who had enough. The night air hit me like clarity. Cool, still, untouched by the staleness of that room behind me. My car was parked on the street, under a dim street lamp that buzzed softly. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Paid off, reliable, like me. As I approached it, I could still hear faint murmurs from inside the house. I imagined them trying to rewrite the moment already. Samira probably blaming her laugh on the alcohol. Andre likely pacing in the kitchen, trying to come up with a comeback that never came when it was needed. I slid into the driver's seat, shut the door gently, and just sat for a second. The kind of quiet that followed wasn't just from the outside world. It came from inside me too. Like something had finally gone still after years of static. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I didn't check it. I didn't care if it was Mom or Andre or even Samira. I knew the pattern. First would come the messages. Malik, come back. Let's talk. Then the guilt. You didn't have to embarrass him like that. Then the rewriting. He didn't mean it. You're being too sensitive. But I wasn't going to open a single one of them. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I started the engine and pulled away slowly. No tires screeching. No dramatic exit. Just the hum of forward motion. The GPS wasn't on, but I didn't need it. I knew my way home. I just hadn't felt like I belonged there in a long time. I passed through the city in near silence. Streetlights casting long shadows across my windshield, late-night joggers moving like ghosts, gas stations glowing in the dark like confessions waiting to be made. It was strange how everything felt clearer even though nothing outside had changed. Back at my apartment, the hallway light flickered as I unlocked my door. Inside, the familiar scent of my space welcomed me, cedarwood and faint remnants of the incense I sometimes lit when the weight got too heavy. I dropped my keys on the counter, kicked off my shoes, and stood in the middle of the room for a moment, just breathing. I was alone, yes, but not the kind of alone Andre had mocked. This was solitude, not exile. There was a difference. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, the kind of small, grounding act that reminded me I was still here, still whole, still standing. I thought about all the moments that led to tonight. The ones I'd buried. The dinners where I footed the bill and left without a thank you. The late-night calls from Andre about missed deadlines and overdue payments. The time Mom had called and said, Andre's just in a rough patch. He'll pay you back. That was 3 years ago. He hadn't. I took a sip of water and stared out the window. City lights blinked in the distance, unbothered by human drama. I wasn't mad anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just done. Not in the bitter, I'm never speaking to them again way. In the quiet, final way. Like turning off a light in a room you no longer needed to visit. Then I remembered the look on Andre's face when I said it, when I laid it all bare in front of everyone. That half second where his mask slipped and something raw peeked through. He wasn't just embarrassed. He was exposed. For the first time, he couldn't pretend. That expression had been worth it. Not out of revenge, but because it finally gave me back my power. The power to name what I'd carried. The power to choose not to carry it anymore. I thought of Samira too. The way she'd laughed, loud, careless, cruel. I didn't know if it was bitterness or pride that pushed her to take that jab, but either way, I no longer cared. She had become someone I didn't recognize. Maybe she always was, and I just couldn't see it when I was too busy cleaning up her messes. I sat down on the couch and exhaled. My body still held a bit of the tension from the night, like it hadn't caught up with the fact that the war was over. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. The phone buzzed again. This time, a call. I let it ring out. Then another message notification popped up, and I finally glanced. Andre, you really had to do that? At my birthday. I stared at it. No apology. No accountability. Just ego. I set the phone down, face down, and let it vibrate against the table until it gave up. I had no interest in fixing things anymore. My entire life had been about fixing things that other people broke. No more. I had exited that role tonight, and not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, financially. I was no longer the default. I was no longer the fallback plan. And as I sat there in the soft light of my apartment, hearing nothing but my own breathing, I realized something. This peace? This was what they feared the most. Because without my help, without my silence, without my wallet, what were they? I didn't know, and I didn't need to find out. I woke up the next morning with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. No anxiety spike. No mental to-do list running laps in my skull. just a stillness that clung to me like armor. It was the kind of silence I used to chase after therapy sessions or long drives with no destination, except this time, it wasn't temporary. It felt permanent. Earned. And it all started with a screen. I sat on the edge of my bed, the faint morning light spilling through the blinds. My phone was still on Do Not Disturb. I hadn't checked it since the night before, and I had no intention of doing so now. I reached for my laptop instead, opened the banking app, and logged in. The dashboard greeted me with its usual sterile numbers. But today, those numbers meant something different. Today, they weren't instructions, they were freedom. I scrolled to the Scheduled Transfers tab and just stared for a second. It was a long list. I hadn't realized how long until I saw it all laid out in one place: Andre's mortgage. 210,000 Nigerian Nairas monthly. Mom and Dad's electricity and medication fund, Nigerian Naira 85,000. Samira's mobile and insurance. Even her streaming service bundle, Nigerian Naira 29,500. All automated. All draining. Not just my account, but my sense of self. One by one, I clicked cancel. The first was Andre's mortgage. A simple button. No drama. No explanation needed. Just confirm cancellation. My finger hovered over it for a moment, not out of doubt, but out of disbelief that it was this easy. Years of quiet resentment unraveled with one click. I tapped it. Done. Next, the electricity and medication account. I paused, not out of guilt, but to be honest with myself. My parents were aging. My mother had sacrificed much, but I'd already given more than money. I had sacrificed being seen. I had sacrificed being heard. Every time they brushed aside my exhaustion with, "Your brother needs you," I bled a little more. They'd figure it out, just like I always had. Click. Then came Samira. I almost laughed when I saw her name. Her insurance premium had my card on file, still. The woman who had left our marriage with a smirk and barely a word had also left behind her financial leash. I had kept paying it out of habit, out of foolish, bone-deep guilt. She had convinced me I was the reason she couldn't breathe. I took a breath of my own. Click. The final screen displayed a confirmation. All scheduled transfers canceled. The message didn't feel cold. It felt clean. Like pulling out a thorn and watching the skin begin to heal. I grabbed my phone and opened my messages, not to reply, just to see how loud the fallout had become. 32 unread texts. 8 missed calls. Andre, unsurprisingly, led the list. Andre, yo, what was that last night? Andre, you embarrassed me in front of everyone. Andre, are you seriously canceling the mortgage support? Bro, I got kids. Andre, call me back, man. Then came Mom. Mom, Malik, Andre was just joking. He didn't mean it like that. Mom, you shouldn't have done that in public. Call me, please. Mom, family handles things privately, baby. And Samira, of course. Samira, so now I'm being punished too? Seriously. Samira, we all laughed, but no one meant harm. Samira, you're just too sensitive. There it was. The old language. I'd seen it 1,000 times. Dismissal wrapped in concern. Gaslighting with emojis. A polite way to say, you're not allowed to have boundaries. I didn't reply to a single one. Instead, I opened a new group chat. Just 3 people, Mom, Andre, and Samira. I typed slowly, deliberately. Malik, I've supported you all for years without asking for anything in return. But last night was my limit. I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. But I'm done. From this point forward, please make other arrangements. I believe in your ability to figure it out. Just like I've had to. I hit send. No flourishes. No emojis. No passive-aggressive tone. Just clarity. Then I blocked the group and archived the thread. I stood from the bed and exhaled. Deeply, fully, like something was unclenching inside my chest. My apartment felt different already. Lighter. The plants in the corner even looked greener, like they'd been waiting for me to reclaim my air. I didn't have anywhere urgent to be. I had canceled everyone else's emergency. I opened a blank page in my notebook and started writing. Not journaling, planning. Things I had postponed because someone else's crisis always came first. The photography course I wanted to take. The part-time consultancy project I'd kept saying maybe next month. The therapy sessions I'd paused because Andre needed another bridge loan. My phone buzzed again. A new number this time. Likely someone calling on Andre's behalf. I let it go to voicemail. I wasn't curious. Instead, I walked to my window, looked out over the city, and let the morning sun touch my face. It wasn't just another day. It was my day. Mine to use, to guard, to build with. And for once, I wasn't looking over my shoulder waiting for someone else's world to collapse into mine. They would call me selfish. They would call me dramatic. They would say I changed. They were right. The switch had been flipped, not out of spite, out of necessity. And there was no turning it back on. It took 4 days for the first voicemail to land. I knew it would come, like clockwork. I just didn't know who would crack first. Turns out it was my mother. The one who used to say, "You know, your brother doesn't mean half the things he says," as though intention ever outweighed impact. I was eating a quiet breakfast when the notification blinked onto my screen. One new voicemail. I hesitated, staring at it like it might explode in my hand. Part of me wanted to delete it immediately, but something about the name next to it, Mom, made me press play. Just once. Her voice came through soft, almost too careful. "Malik, it's your mother. I've been thinking about what happened at the party, and I want you to know Andre didn't mean it. He was just joking. You know how he gets when he's had a drink. You didn't have to embarrass him like that. Call me, baby. Let's talk this through. Don't make this a bigger thing than it is." I hit stop before she could finish. A joke. They called it a joke. That wasn't just a mischaracterization. It was a slap in the face, reheated, and served as concern. I sat back in my chair, my appetite dissolving into a sour taste in my mouth. I replayed that moment at the party, not because I needed to relive it, but because I needed to remind myself that I hadn't imagined it. The mic in Andre's hand, the smirk on his face, the words, "What does it feel like to be 38, no wife, no kids, and still alone?" weren't said in jest. They were a calculated gut punch disguised as humor. And my mother, the woman whose medical bills I had covered for years without question, was calling it a joke. I didn't call her back. An hour later, another message pinged in, this time from Samira. "Samira, we all laughed, but no one meant harm. You're just too sensitive." I stared at the screen, fingers curling around the phone. That line, "You're too sensitive," wasn't new. I'd heard it in college when I asked Andre not to tell stories about my failed first relationship in front of strangers. I heard it from Samira when she joked that I was too cautious to be sexy. I'd heard it from Mom after I cried the day my father told me, flat out, that I was wasting my potential by playing it safe. Every time I stood up for myself, they said I was overreacting. Emotional. Dramatic. But it wasn't drama. It was defense. And I was tired of defending the right to feel anything at all. I stood, walked to the sink, and rinsed my plate in silence. The apartment felt different these days. Not just because of the quiet, but because it no longer felt like a waiting room for the next fire I had to put out. It was mine. I moved at my pace, ate when I wanted, sat on the couch without expecting a call that would pull me into someone else's chaos. But the texts kept coming. "Andre, so I guess we're just done now? Over a joke? Andre, you couldn't have said something to me in private? Andre, you always act like you're the only one who sacrifices." That last one made me laugh, a short, bitter sound that didn't reach past my throat. I stared at the message, letting the absurdity wash over me. Sacrifices? Andre had confused inconvenience with sacrifice. Borrowing money wasn't a sacrifice. Living in a home someone else paid for wasn't a sacrifice. Embarrassing your own brother to elevate your ego wasn't a sacrifice. It was selfishness dressed up in borrowed nobility. I turned off notifications and set my phone down. I refused to waste my energy justifying my own boundaries. The people who hurt you rarely wanted reflection. They wanted access. And when that access was denied, they cried betrayal. I opened my laptop and started working on a proposal for a new contract gig, a small brand consulting firm looking for operational restructuring. It was the kind of thing I used to turn down because I didn't have the bandwidth, because my time was always spoken for by someone else's needs. But now I had time. Now I had space. Still, by late afternoon, another wave of guilt tried to settle in. Old habits. The voice in my head started whispering that maybe I'd gone too far. That maybe Andre didn't mean it. That maybe my mother was just trying to keep the family from falling apart. But then I remembered the laughter. The room full of people who knew exactly what was happening and said nothing. The way no one flinched when my dignity was made the punchline. I remembered how it felt to stare at my plate while Samira leaned back, laughing with her whole chest like my pain was part of the entertainment. That wasn't a joke. That was a choice. And I'd made mine too. That evening, I went for a walk around my neighborhood. letting the breeze cut through the remnants of anger still clinging to my skin. I passed the corner bakery, waved at the older woman who always watered her balcony plants, and let myself breathe. I didn't owe anyone a reaction. I didn't owe anyone forgiveness on their timeline. I didn't owe anyone my peace in exchange for their comfort. When I got home, I lit a candle and played a little Nina Simone, something slow and unapologetic. I poured a glass of water, not wine. I wanted clarity, not sedation. And I sat by my window with the city lights blinking in the distance like they were winking at me, like they knew something the rest of the world didn't. I checked my phone one last time, not out of weakness, but to see if maybe, just maybe, someone had gotten it. They hadn't. Another message from my mother. Mom, baby, family doesn't cut family off. That's not how we were raised. I didn't reply. But if I had, I might have said, family also doesn't humiliate family in public. Family doesn't laugh while you bleed. Family doesn't expect silence in exchange for loyalty. Instead, I closed the app, set the phone down gently, and whispered aloud, more to myself than anyone else. It's not a joke if the only person laughing is the one doing the damage. And with that, I turned off the lights, walked to bed, and slept without needing to explain myself to a single soul. It was a Tuesday when I finally let go, not with a bang, but with the slow, deliberate quiet of a man who'd stopped waiting for anyone to hand him closure. I stood in the center of my storage unit, surrounded by boxes filled with things I no longer needed, tied to people who no longer knew me. Old holiday decorations, hand-me-down tools from Dad, a set of photo albums I hadn't opened in years, smiling faces, forced poses, and smiles I could now see were full of obligation. I packed the final box of old books, slid it into the back seat of my car, and drove across town to my new apartment. Not a big move, just enough distance. Just enough space to breathe without choking on history. My new place was smaller, but it faced the sun, and the windows opened wide without sticking. I could hear birds in the morning instead of traffic. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like a blank page. I didn't send out a group message. I didn't drop my new address in the family WhatsApp. I wasn't angry. I wasn't hiding. I was simply done performing. Done proving my worth to people who only clapped when I paid the bill or caught the falling knife with my bare hands. This new chapter wasn't about revenge. It was about release. My therapist, Dr. Howard, nodded when I told her. You're grieving, she said softly. Not a person, necessarily, but the version of yourself that tried for so long to be everything to everyone. That stuck with me. Grief wasn't always about funerals. Sometimes it was packing a box without telling anyone where it was going. In our sessions, we talked a lot about boundaries, how mine had never existed, how being needed had become my identity, how walking away felt like betrayal, even when staying meant losing myself in pieces. She called it the slow bleed. And that's exactly what it had been, years of microcuts, disguised as loyalty. I'd been hemorrhaging behind a polite smile for so long that I forgot what it felt like to be full. So I cut the cord. I changed my number. Not dramatically, no announcement. Just a silent reshuffling of priorities. The people who saw me, who truly checked in, would find a way to reach me. Everyone else? They'd feel the distance and call it coldness. But it wasn't coldness. It was clarity. I reconnected with my old college roommate, Damien. He'd reached out after hearing about what happened at Andre's party. Word had traveled faster than truth, as usual. Man, I heard you finally snapped, he said, half laughing. Took you long enough. We met for coffee. No drama. No probing questions. Just real conversation. He didn't ask why I stopped talking to the family. He already knew. You used to carry them like rent, he said, sipping his espresso. But you're not their landlord. You're not their therapist. You're not their savior. It felt good to hear someone say it out loud. A week after the move, I bought new furniture, not because I needed it, but because I wanted to sit on something that had no memory. No one had curled up beside me on that couch. No one had borrowed that blanket and never returned it. I picked earth tones. Calming. Uncomplicated. I bought a new coffee table made of solid oak and placed a single candle at the center. Just one. Because I finally understood. I didn't have to fill every space to feel whole. Then came the knock at the door. It was late, just after sunset. I hadn't ordered anything. Wasn't expecting anyone. I hesitated before opening it, already knowing who it would be. Andre. He stood there in a wrinkled hoodie and basketball shorts, looking more like a guilty teenager than the family's golden son. His expression flickered between sheepish and defiant, like he was trying to decide whether to apologize or lecture me. "Hey," he said. I didn't respond. He rubbed the back of his neck. "You moved." "I did." "You changed your number." "Correct." He shifted, trying to peek past me into the apartment. "You gonna invite me in, or?" "No." His eyes widened slightly. He wasn't used to being told no. "Not by me." "I just wanted to talk," he said. "I mean, you didn't have to go nuclear." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean I didn't have to speak the truth?" He sighed. "Look, man, I was joking. You know that." I leaned against the doorframe. Calm. Grounded. "Let me ask you something, Andre. If someone slapped you in front of a crowd and then said, 'I was just playing,' would your cheek stop stinging?" He looked down. "I didn't think it'd go that far." "No," I said. "You didn't think I'd go that far. You counted on me staying quiet like I always have. That's what hurt you the most." He looked away, hands in his pockets. "You're really cutting us all off?" I didn't answer right away. I wanted him to feel the space between us. The distance I had fought so hard to shrink my entire life, now stretching like a border wall. "I'm cutting off the version of me that let you take without giving back," I said. "If you can meet me outside of that? Maybe. But I'm not walking back into that old role." "So what now?" he asked, eyes dull. "You just become some new guy?" I shook my head slowly. "No. I just stopped pretending the old guy was okay." He didn't say anything. Just stood there, nodding like he understood. But I wasn't sure if he did. Not yet. Understanding wasn't guaranteed. It was earned. And I wasn't here to teach anymore. "Take care of yourself," I said, then closed the door gently, not with anger, but with peace. I stood on the other side for a moment, hands still on the knob, listening for footsteps. They came after a pause. Slow. Hesitant. Then gone. That night, I slept like someone who'd just unpacked not just boxes, but truth. This was my unfriending ceremony, not out of bitterness, but rebirth. Not because I didn't love them, but because I finally loved myself enough to stop bleeding just to keep them comfortable. The phone doesn't ring anymore. Not at odd hours. Not for last-minute rescues. Not for explanations that begin with, "I hate to ask," but it's quiet now, and not the kind of quiet that feels like punishment, but the kind that feels earned. The kind that wraps around your shoulders and says, "You don't owe anyone your exhaustion." Months have passed since I walked out of that party and laid down the weight I'd carried for years. And in that time, I've become someone I almost forgot existed, someone I trust. I didn't go to family dinners after that night. I skipped birthdays. I ignored the carefully worded invitations to drop by for brunch or talk things over. I had already talked. I had said the things they were never prepared to hear. And the silence that followed wasn't just theirs, it was mine, too. A decision to stop trying to be the version of Malik that everyone leaned on while secretly rolling their eyes behind his back. They called it pride. Some called it spite. But it wasn't either. It was preservation. I started waking up before my alarm. Not because I had to rush anywhere, but because sleep was no longer an escape. I didn't dread the day. I didn't open my eyes already bracing for the next demand. I brewed my coffee in silence, sat by the window, and watched the morning unfold. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I journaled. Sometimes I just let the steam rise from the mug and disappear into the air, reminding me how beautiful things could be when they weren't being pulled in 100 directions. I started dating again slowly, tentatively. Not looking for someone to fix or save, but someone who would ask me how my day was and mean it. There was a woman named Tasha I met at a bookstore. She was browsing the same poetry shelf I was. We started talking about Ross Gay, then Lucille Clifton, then coffee. She didn't ask what I did for a living until the third conversation. She never once asked about my family. Not because she didn't care, but because she could sense that part of the story needed to unfold on my terms. We went on walks, talked without noise, laughed without edge. It was refreshing, how simple kindness could feel revolutionary when you'd spent years being expected to earn it with your silence. My therapist said something during one of our sessions that stuck with me. Sometimes the best apology you can give to yourself is a boundary you enforce. I used to think boundaries were walls, cold things, hard things. But now I understand they're more like doors with locks. Still capable of opening, but only to people who knock with respect. And those who don't, they stay outside. I kept the messages. All of them. I didn't delete the texts or the voicemails. Not to wallow in them, but as reminders. Evidence. Proof that I wasn't imagining it. That it wasn't all in my head. I revisit them from time to time, not to reopen wounds, but to see how far I've come. They no longer sting. They read like stories from another life. I never unblocked the group chat. I didn't reach out for the holidays. I didn't send birthday greetings. And when no one showed up on mine, I didn't feel hurt. I felt free. Because what they never understood, what I had never even admitted to myself, is that I was never trying to be a hero. I was trying to be seen, to be heard, to be loved without having to bleed for it. And when that didn't happen, I settled for usefulness. Because being useful is close enough to being needed. And being needed feels, for a while, like being wanted. But it's not. It's not the same. Being wanted is someone saying, sit, stay, rest. I've got this one. Being useful is someone saying, you're strong. You'll figure it out, while they hand you another bag to carry. No? I travel light. No more bags that aren't mine. No more guilt-soaked calls. No more stretching myself thin just to make people comfortable in their bad habits. One night, about 2 months after it all unraveled, I found myself sitting by the window in my new place, watching the rain pattern against the glass like music. The city outside was quiet. Even the streetlights looked softer. I had a book open in my lap, but I wasn't reading. I was just being. And I whispered something barely audible, but real. I said, this is what it feels like. Not with bitterness. Not with pain. Just wonder. Because for the first time, I wasn't apologizing for being alone. I wasn't defining myself by what I didn't have. No wife, no kids, no flashy car or 6-bedroom house. I was defining myself by what I no longer tolerated. By what I now protected. By what I gave to myself, finally, without permission. This is what it feels like to stop begging for a seat at the table you built. To walk away from people who only saw your worth when they needed something. To sleep through the night without mentally budgeting for someone else's rent. To look in the mirror and not see a fixer, or a provider, or a dependable shoulder, but just a man. A full one. A flawed one. A free one. I don't know what will happen with my family. Maybe one day Andre will get it. Maybe Mom will realize her version of keeping the peace was just forcing silence. Maybe they'll call. Maybe they won't. I don't need them to anymore. I'm not angry. Not anymore. But I am done. And sometimes, that's the bravest thing you can be.